Thank you, Nina Enrique. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. Nearly 3 years into the war in Ukraine, a new conflict has emerged, and this time, a war of words between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
That he wasn't invited, he could have come if he wanted to, but that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But he's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this war. It's a horrible thing.
So unfortunately, President Trump, who we respect a lot as a leader of the nation that we really respect, the American nation, who supported us all the time, unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space.
And the news starts now. Nearly 3 years into the war in Ukraine, a new conflict has emerged, and this time, a war of words between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It began when President Trump accused President Zelensky of starting the war with Russia. Now, in response, President Zelensky accused President Trump of echoing Russian propaganda. This exchange has intensified tensions as the conflict approaches its third anniversary. Here's more.
U.S. President Donald Trump escalated his war of words with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday, calling him a dictator without elections in a Truth Social post, adding that he better move fast or he is not going to have a country left.
President Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won, that never had to start and never would have started if I was president, not even a chance. And it didn't start for 4 years, never would have started. But a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. They'll never settle that war without our involvement. That's why they did such a great job this weekend. That's why Saudi Arabia did such a great job this weekend in hosting. $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably maybe he wants to keep the gravy train going. I don't know what's the problem, but he hasn't been able. He's very upset that he wasn't invited. He could have come if he wanted to, but that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But he's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this war. It's a horrible thing.
Trump's post came just hours after Zelensky said the U.S. president was trapped in a Russian disinformation bubble, after Trump suggested on Tuesday that Ukraine was responsible for Russia's full-scale invasion.
You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Speaking at a news briefing, Zelensky said he would like Trump's team to have more truth about his country. Zelensky also said Trump's assertion that his approval rating was just 4% was Russian disinformation, and that any attempt to replace him would fail.
Якщо хтось хоче мене поміняти прямо зараз, то прямо зараз ніяк не вийде. Я би так сказав.
If someone wants to replace me right now, I would say it won't happen right now, as we are talking about 4%. We have seen this disinformation. We understand it's coming from Russia. We understand that, and we have proof that these numbers are being discussed between America and Russia. So unfortunately, President Trump, who we respect a lot as a leader of the nation that we really respect, the American nation, who supported us all the time, unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space.
An early February poll from the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology shows 57% of Ukrainians trust their president. Trump's comments criticizing Zelensky come as the war between Ukraine and Russia nears its 3-year mark, following Russia's invasion on February 24, 2022. Russia has seized some 20% of Ukraine and is slowly but steadily gaining more territory in the east. Zelensky's 5-year term was supposed to end in 2024, but presidential and parliamentary elections cannot be held under martial law, which Ukraine imposed in February 2022 in response to Russia's invasion.
I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. And you can't bring a war to an end if you don't talk to both sides. You got to talk. They haven't been talking for 3 years. So we hope to see a ceasefire soon and to reestablish stability in Europe and the Middle East. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break.
The war of words between Trump and Zelensky comes after a phone call between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin last week, which upended U.S. policy to isolate Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. It also follows talks between senior U.S. and Russian officials on ending the war that did not include Ukraine or Europe. On Wednesday, Putin praised the outcome of those talks in Saudi Arabia, saying, quote, "I rate them highly," and added that Ukraine would not be excluded from negotiations to end the war.
To
be honest, I am surprised at the restraint of the newly elected President of the United States, Trump, in dealing with his allies, who have behaved in such a, frankly, caddish manner. He's still being quite modest in their relations. They're not shutting themselves off. If we're talking about Ukrainian settlement, the United States is working with its European allies. Mr. Keith Kellogg, as far as I know, is in Kyiv right now. He has also met with the Europeans before.
Meanwhile, Trump's envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, met with Zelensky in Kyiv on Wednesday. He told reporters he was there to listen and said he understood Ukraine's need for security guarantees.
It's a chance to have a good substantial talks. We had a chance to see President Zelensky and his team down in Munich. So I think this is going to be a continuation. Looking forward to doing it. I appreciate you all being out here.
What will be your main message to the President?
Well, I think we're going to listen. We understand the need for security guarantees. We're very clear that's the importance of sovereignty of this nation and the defense of this nation as well. And we're going to, part of my mission is to sit and listen and say, okay, what are your concerns? What are we asking? We can go back to the United States, talk to President Trump, and with Secretary Rubio and the rest of the team, and just ensure that we get this one right. You know, this war has been going on now for 3 years, and President Trump's right. It's a war that very candidly, I truly believe would not have started if he was still president. It's an egregious war in the sense of the length of time and the casualties there. He understands the human suffering. He understands the damage that we see. And I think we want to see an end to it. I think it'd be good for the region, good for the world, good for all.
A denunciation by Donald Trump of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator is not necessarily indicative of a major change in U.S. policy, according to an analyst. The U.S. president also warned that Zelensky had to move quickly to secure peace or risk losing his country, deepening a feud between the two leaders that has alarmed European officials. Now, while the rhetoric of Trump and other officials has understandably been alarming to Kiev, John Herbst of the Atlantic Council said President Trump has made comments in the past that indicate he does not intend to abandon Ukraine.
There's a cost to Trump and his desire to end the war quickly in that agenda. Because, as he said rightly, 2 or 3 days into his second presidency, Putin's the obstacle. By making this broader, he was saying to Putin, this is not necessarily my highest priority. And if Putin is the obstacle, which he is, Trump needs to make clear it is his highest priority by giving the proper disincentives for Putin to continue the war.
So unfortunately, President Trump, who we respect a lot as a leader of the nation that we really respect, the American nation, who supported us all the time, unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space.
We have yet to hear something from Trump, and now I'm talking about not just in the last few weeks, but even going back last year, where he clearly states that Russia is an aggressor and Ukraine is the victim. We just haven't heard that. So in that sense, the statements we're hearing now reflect a similar avoiding of some very clear realities. And while democracy is not perfect in Ukraine, it is democracy, whereas there's no democracy in Russia. So that makes Trump calling Zelensky a dictator rather fatuous if he's saying nothing about the strong man in Moscow.
Herbst, a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and Uzbekistan, said that the personal exchanges may only reflect Trump's tendency to engage in hyperbolic name-calling when he feels provoked.
The nastiness of these personal exchanges, well, we know that Trump was long had a penchant for labeling other figures internationally, nationally, in the United States with colorful names and insulting names, right? And we know that Trump doesn't like to give someone else the last word. And Zelensky, who's really fast on his feet, is also used to not being insulted or in some way attacked without responding. And in the case of Trump, that just makes him madder, and his rhetoric becomes more hyperbolic.
And what is damaging, however, are calls by Trump for elections in Ukraine, something that is not permitted by Ukraine's constitution and something none of the opposition parties want.
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating.
This is not the most colorful, but it is probably the most damaging thing that the Trump team has said. Because no one in Ukraine, none of the opposition leaders want elections. By Ukraine's constitution, you can't have elections in wartime. The international IFES, which is the International Agency regarding election integrity, says having an election in Ukraine during wartime is nuts. He said, I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks ago, I'm not going to throw Ukraine to the wolves. Now, that doesn't mean he won't, but I think we've seen a pretty clear indication over months, ever since Trump okayed the aid package to Ukraine in April of last year, that is not Trump's intention. Now, he is mercurial. He could change his mind. I think there are people around him who don't understand how important it is to American interest that Putin not win his war in Ukraine and take over the country effectively, which is what would happen if we simply stopped aid to Ukraine. But Trump, I think, understands that it would be very bad for the United States and very bad for him personally if he brokered a deal which allowed Putin ultimately to take control of the country. So I think the best news of the past 7 days has been the sudden attention of major European nations to need to put together that peacekeeping force that Trump talks about. Trump was pleased by the fact that you had these 2 meetings now in Western Europe to make progress on this. But this issue was nowhere 2 weeks ago. And now it is somewhere. I mean, obviously it's just a start, but it's a very good start.
U.S. President Donald Trump has shared that Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to visit the United States, though no specific date has been set. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump mentioned the possibility of a new trade deal with China, emphasizing the importance of direct discussions with President Xi.
I have a very good relationship with President Xi. I think a great relationship with President Xi. But remember, he loves China, and I love the USA. So, right there's a little bit of competitiveness. But the relationship I have with President Xi is, I would say, a great one. It was obviously hurt by COVID coming in. It hurt them, hurt us, hurt everybody, hurt the whole world. But outside of that, I have a very, very good relationship with President Xi.
Are you looking to
I think he's a very unique person.
Now, the two leaders have maintained communication since Trump's inauguration on January 20, engaging in conversations covering topics such as trade, the social media platform TikTok, and the status of Taiwan.
Would you make a new trade deal with China? I mean,
it's possible.
One trade deal never really got...
It's possible. Well, we did a great trade deal with China. We did it great for the farmers, great for manufacturers. They had to buy $50 billion worth of our product, and we were making them buy it. The problem is that Biden didn't push them to adhere to it.
Now, in their most recent call, President Trump and President Xi discussed the future of TikTok following a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that requires the app's Chinese owner, ByteDance, to sell the platform due to national security concerns.
TikTok deal. Any developments there?
No, there's a lot of people interested in TikTok, and I think we have a chance of doing something good. And we'll be speaking to China about that also, because they're a party to it, obviously. But it would be great to keep TikTok alive, sell it to somebody that's going to do a great job with it.
Support from U.S. President Donald Trump's administration for Taiwan remains very strong, and Taiwan is looking at more purchases from the country, including LNG to help balance trade. This according to a senior Taiwan security official today. Now, Trump has repeatedly criticized Taiwan for taking U.S. semiconductor business, saying he wants the industry to rebase to the United States. He's also threatened broad import tariffs on countries which have unbalanced trade with the U.S., which could affect Taiwan given the large trade surplus it runs. Now, speaking at the Halifax International Security Forum in Taipei, Joseph Wu, head of Taiwan's National Security Council, said that the island had many friends in the new administration, especially in the security and defense apparatus.
The United States has been very helpful, providing us with defensive articles and help train our soldiers, and also try to bring us more to the international community. I would say in the last few years, our relationship with the like-minded partners have been increasing, and that is because of the U.S. government. And I see that trend remains. Our support in the Congress, our support from those people who might be, who were already nominated or who will be nominated and served in the administration will still be there. So I think the Trump administration's support for Taiwan will remain very strong.
Now, asked about Trump's comments on chips, Wu said that Taiwan's TSMC, the dominant maker of advanced semiconductors, started from scratch.
They took the business away. Taiwan took our chip business away. We had Intel, we had these great companies that did so well, and it was taken from us, and we want that business back.
That if you look at the TSMC, they started from scratch. There was some help from the international community, of course, but they continue to excel themselves. We did not steal anything from anybody. And Taiwan has been very honest in doing business with the international community.
Taiwan runs a large trade surplus with the U.S., which surged 83% last year, with the island's exports to the U.S. hitting a record $111.4 billion, driven by demand for high-tech products such as semiconductors. Liquefied natural gas, or LNG, is one area the government is already considering, especially from Alaska.
And if Alaska starts producing LNG in big numbers, that will be a very good time for us to buy more. And we are in discussion with Alaska now.
Wu said U.S. LNG was very high quality, but coming from existing suppliers, Texas and Louisiana, it took longer to reach Taiwan, given it had to go via the Panama Canal. In other news tonight, today, Israel is mourning as Hamas has returned the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages, including 33-year-old Sherry Bibas and her 2 young sons, 9-month-old Kifir and 4-year-old Ariel. The Bibas family was among those abducted during the October 7, 2023 attack on kibbutz near Oz. Now, their remains were handed over as part of a ceasefire agreement facilitated by international mediators. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation, stating this:
"Tomorrow will be a very difficult day for the state of Israel. A shocking day, a day of grief. We're bringing home 4 of our favorite hostages, fallen hostages. We hug the families, and the heart of an entire nation is torn. My heart is torn. Yours too. And the heart of the whole world needs to break, because here we see who we are dealing with, what we are dealing with, what monsters. We are grieving, we are in pain, but we are also determined to ensure that something like this does not happen again."
The handover occurred in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, where Red Cross vehicles received the coffins, each bearing a photo of the deceased. The Bibas family had been held captive since the October 7 attack. Hamas previously claimed they were killed in an Israeli airstrike, but this was not confirmed by Israeli authorities. Now, this event underscores the ongoing complexities and deep emotional toll of the conflict, even amid ceasefire agreements.
The This is probably the saddest day since October 7. On the other hand, I'm happy that the families has a relief that their loved ones are back.
Today is going to be a very sad day to the state of Israel because we had a lot of casualties. The Hamas raped, burned, killed, massacred a lot of women, men, and children in October 7th, 23. But we knew about those hostages, the Bibas family. We saw them being taken alive and captured by the Hamas. And the lies that they're trying to spread around the world today, that supposedly they died because Israeli bombed in Gaza and they got killed. It's the biggest lie. They just massacred and murdered those people. There's no mercy with those people.
Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian addressed the recent incident in Toronto where a regional jet flipped upon landing. Speaking on CBS Mornings, Bastian emphasized that the pilots were seasoned and well-versed in winter operations. Now, he described the accident footage as horrifying, but commended the crew's swift evacuation efforts, noting, "This is what we trained for continuously." The crash, which occurred amid high winds and freezing temperatures, resulted in 21 injuries among the 80 passengers and crew on board. Fortunately, all are expected to recover. Delta is offering $30,000 in goodwill payments to each passenger, ensuring this gesture doesn't affect their legal rights. Investigations are underway, with black box data being analyzed to determine the cause of the accident.
Other duties we'll be conducting here on site are examining the wreckage, examining the runway. We've already removed the cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder, and we've sent them to our lab for further analysis. At this point, it's far too early to say what the cause of this accident might be. However, we will share more information once we're able to.
A top seismologist who has been following the tremors on the popular tourism island of Santorini said that the seismic activity was gradually diminishing.
In the current phase, 19 days after the beginning of the activity, we believe the seismic activity is gradually diminishing. The earthquakes have a smaller size and are more sparse. And of course, there is no connection between the volcanic activity and the seismic activity. We believe that the phenomena will continue for a short period of time and will return to normal levels.
Thousands of earthquakes measuring up to 5.3 magnitude have been recorded in the Aegean Sea off Santorini since February 1, prompting authorities to declare it in a state of emergency for at least a month. More than 11,000 people, among those many seasonal workers, have fled. Geology professor Efthymios Lekas, who is also the head of Greece's Earthquake Planning and Protection Organization, or EPO, also said there is no chance of a volcanic explosion. The seismic activity isn't connected with the volcanic activity.
There is no chance of an explosion of the volcano. For the volcano to erupt, it requires several years, intense pre-volcanic activity, and then to reach an explosive activity, which it won't arrive. It may not arrive because the whole volcanic activity will fade out before any major volcanic explosion occurs.
Lekas said he believed the tremors will continue for a short period of time before returning to normal levels. Additional seismographs have been installed on the volcanic islet of Nea Kameni in the flooded Santorini caldera after tens of thousands of earthquakes have struck the area since January. The seismographs are expected to measure the impact of the recent seismic activity on the small uninhabited islet and its craters, part of Santorini's chain of islands created by volcanoes. And tonight, we bring you a harrowing account of human trafficking victims who escaped brutal conditions in Myanmar's scam compounds. Now, these individuals, lured by false job promises, endured severe torture and coercion.
I asked one of my colleagues from this place, what happened there? What is the job? And he was told me about their punch, electric shock. And same at night, I informed to them I want to go back to my country. I don't want to work. So we are not scammer. We are victim. They use us. And if somebody don't want to work with them, they are in Myanmar, they say, in Chinese say, they have one of biggest market, the place. Here they are selling the organ, human organ, kidney, eye, like this. They are warning us, if you are not working with us, we can did it with your body.
I get a lot of punishment, like I receive shock, electric shock every day. I receive punch every day. Like nothing. They just want to punish us, and they punish us because like we were working for 18 hours without salary, without they didn't allow us to contact our family.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. Scientists are closely monitoring an asteroid that has a small but notable chance of striking Earth in 2032. The European Space Agency and other organizations are now enlisting the James Webb Space Telescope to better understand this potential threat, known as 2024 YR4.
2024 YR4 is an asteroid that was discovered on the 27th of December of the last year. And along the month of January of the present year, we've been collecting many more observations that have allowed us to constrain the orbit of this object. And as we were gathering all those observations, we quickly saw that the chances of this object impacting the Earth on the 22nd of December 2032 were rising little by little, to the point that by the 27th of January, the impact probabilities for this object rose above a threshold that we have agreed internationally, which is the 1% impact probability, which is a threshold that let's say tells us that we have to put a special care, more care on this object. So we have to request observations from other telescopes, actually request a time, in this case, for example, for James Webb on space telescopes, in order to ascertain with the highest possible accuracy what is the situation with regards to this object and with regards to the possibilities of impacting the Earth.
The asteroid, first spotted by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, or ATLAS telescope in Chile, is currently moving away from Earth but will return in 2028, estimated to be between 40 meters or 131 feet and 90 meters or 295 feet across. It's traveling at approximately 15 times the speed of a high-velocity bullet.
If we speak of a Tunguska case, event case, in the case it was around 50 meters. If it was 90 meters, we would be easily speaking of 10 times the effect of the Tunguska event back in 1908. We are still having a 98% of probabilities of not impacting. So I'd say that people should not be very much worried. Again, as I said, probably at that time, this is a warning for us as scientists and researchers that we should put a lot of attention on this subject in order to gather as many observations as possible in order to ascertain the trajectory of this object with the highest accuracy possible.
Referring to the 1908 incident when an asteroid or comet explosion leveled 80 million trees across 830 square miles in Siberia. And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thanks for joining us. Good night.